1, 2, 3, 4.
You are listening to SKYLIT, the SKYLIT Books podcast. SKYLIT Books is a general interest bookstore in the Los Feliz neighborhood in Los Angeles. You can shop with us from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. or visit us online 24/7 at skylitbooks.com. Follow along at SKYLIT Books Instagram and Twitter. You can subscribe to the podcast on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Thank you for listening, and now on to the episode.
Hello to all our listeners. This is SKYLIT, the SKYLIT Books podcast. I'm your host, Alena Saunders, and today I have the pleasure of chatting with George Saunders. Saunders is the author of 11 books and the recipient of numerous awards. He currently teaches at Syracuse University in their graduate creative writing program. He is also my dad. Hi, Dad.
Hi, honey. My proudest accomplishment.
I was hoping you were going to say that. How is it going?
It's going good.
Yeah?
It's going good. Yeah, my back's a little out from lugging our dog around because she's old. But
we're going to address that.
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm okay. I'm good. Everything, but I'm good.
So I wanted to start off by kind of having you give a little bit of information about yourself. But I was thinking about this, and there are a lot of interviews that, kind of go into your background and how, your journey into becoming a writer. But I wanted to look a little bit more into like your interior process of becoming a writer. Like, did you always think of yourself as a writer, or did that kind of happen over time?
That's good. I didn't always think of myself as a writer, but I always had this, if I think back, like a desire to distinguish myself somehow, like to be good at something and be known for being good at something. So sometimes it was just like a pure ego thing. And then when I would get into the heart of doing something, it would become a desire to get better at it. So when I was really young, it was baseball, which I wasn't that great at, and then music. And then I think writing was something that I kind of didn't think was very cool when I was younger. And then at some point, I guess when I started reading a little more, then it started to feel cool. And then I thought, okay, this is something I want to do. But I think it was under an umbrella of trying to get some attention and trying to be good at something. That was the...
Yes, yeah, totally. But I mean, so when was your first taste of like feeling like getting some positive attention from that? Because
yeah, that's a great question. I remember
it just feels like there was probably a long process of not getting much attention,
right?
And I mean, I think that's every young writer's experience, is having like just rejection until something hits. But so can you talk about
and trying to maintain faith during that part.
Which
especially
because
later. It's so subjective that you're doing it and there's no one that will tell you why it doesn't seem good enough.
Yeah.
But for me, I mean, the thing I remember is I was at the school of mines and studying geophysics, so nobody was reading that much and writing wasn't really part of it. But I took this class.
And you weren't doing that well.
No, I wasn't doing it. It was in the wrong school, it turned out. But so I had a class called by a professor named Jay Gillette, and it was called Mark Twain and the American Western Literature or something. And at the end, he said, okay, now we're going to... each of you is going to write a piece of humor, and it was so easy compared to engineering, which I was always working really hard at and getting like C minus, D.
Yeah.
And this was just so easy. And when I brought it in, he really liked it.
Yeah.
And,
do you remember what it was about?
Yeah, it was a lot like what my first book ended up being, which was a guy who was just losing, like a guy who was losing. And there were a lot of just sort of cheap jokes in it, but it was, what was it? Yeah, it was just overstated jokes, but told pretty well. And so it was really something to hear him like it, because he'd been to this mythical place called Berkeley, which I like. And then the other kids in the class were kind of like, ooh, you're weird, but also like, wow, you did that, And so I always got the reaction of, well, none really, just like being in the middle to bottom of the class and trying to figure out how all these bastards did it, but not studying and everything. So that was a moment when there was that, and there was another class called Theory of Knowledge, which was like a philosophy class. And there I just would he'd ask a question and I would just kind of know how to answer it at length. And it was the same feeling, like people kind of looking at you like, what's weird that you know that. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, yeah, but it's weird that you know so much about science. So touche. But that was the first time. And then I think around that time I was reading a lot of the old, 1930s literature. And I remember one day I went down to Clear Creek with a little old copy of De Maupassant and read it. And there was something so, it was maybe one of the rare times when what I wanted to do and what I was doing were in the same circle. Mm-hmm. Like that whole time was me saying, well, I don't really want to be an engineer and I'm not good at it, but I do want to graduate. So I'll suck it up for, the whole semester. And that was just a moment of like, wow, this is so nice to do what you're good at, which also happens to be what you want to do. But the thing is, at that point, the little sort of defect in my development was I didn't recognize that was not just nice, but necessary. Like I was kind of a little bit of a Catholic in the sense that I thought, well, if I'm not good at it and it's really hard, it must be what I'm meant to do,
Yeah. Well, so then what happened with your writing? When did you start having like a habitual writing practice? Obviously before you went to Syracuse, I'm hoping. But
well, mostly for me, it started when I went overseas. I was in Asia in this oil camp. And so we were out in the jungle in Sumatra, and it was too far to go anywhere. There was nothing around at all. So a lot of the guys would there was a bunk hall, and then there was kind of it's like I don't know what you call it. We call it the bar, but it was just a bar in an empty room. Yeah. And mostly after dinner, the guys would go over there and just get trashed, Yeah. So I sometimes would do that with them. And then, but I found out I had a key to the office, so I could go back to the office and have a typewriter, and I could write a little bit. So that was the first time I tried to kind of have a pretty regular schedule, and it was not very fun. It was, I knew that what I was writing wasn't very good, but I also knew I should have discipline. So that was sort of, and then I think the next time was I was in Chicago, and I just kind of gotten fired from this roofing job, and my high school teachers, the Lindblums, took me in. They saw that I was kind of circling the drain, and they had this nice house with an attic bedroom, and they said, "Look, why don't you just take 2 months and just write? Don't worry, we're going to feed you. You don't have to work." So I did it. I just went up there every day when they drive in to teach. And I just go up there and work for 6 or 7 hours. Yeah. And, so that was really it was kind of like, so periods like that separated by just farting around and trying to make a living. And then a couple of years later, I was in Amarillo working at an apartment complex, and I went through one of those phases. And I actually had a dream and woke up from the dream and wrote from that language, and that became the story that I later got published, and that got me into Syracuse. So it was all hit or miss, nothing. Yeah.
Do you think it would have been more difficult for you to like have that habit of writing if you were in a place that had more distraction? Like, you're talking about kind of the boredom of being out in Indonesia in the,
you're
woods
absolutely right.
Where you have maybe 2 books that you brought, and then you're done with those 2 books. And you don't really have much else to do. Yeah,
and you're right, and I can prove it because I lived here in LA for a while.
Yeah.
And I was a doorman in Beverly Hills, and there was so much going on.
Yeah.
And I had in the apartment I was living in, I had a closet that I made into my writing space, and I had I think I had something
sounds like my LA experience.
There was nowhere else to go, so I think there was a blanket or maybe some beads or something to separate it from the rest of the house. Yeah. But I never went in there because there was always stuff going on, and at that time, I was very much under the sway of Kerouac and Hemingway a little bit, but at that time, Kerouac. So I thought, well, of course, I don't have anything to write about. I'm not doing anything cool. So, and I thought that's why you come to LA, so you can find your artistic group of people that later everyone will talk about, you know. And so I was doing a lot of running around trying to find that, which precluded any actual writing time. But it was a vicious circle because you'd go out and do something, and how do I write about this? I have no idea. Okay, that's not productive. Then I used to go to sit down and try to write, and I would just be like, I don't have anything. And I knew enough. I think Ira Glass talks about this. My standards were high enough as a reader that I could see that what I was writing was shitty. Yeah. So it was really, it's a scary, I think a lot of people come to that where you haven't figured out how to do it yet. You know that what you're doing isn't good enough. And meanwhile, real life is saying, come have fun or come make a living. Yeah. So then what happens is you never get to that kind of deep moment where you have to push through and find what you're what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
You know, but so yeah, it was very touch or go. You know,
Yeah.
touch and go.
So how do you, like, when you are, you know, facing that kind of rejection and writing isn't fun yet? Because now you say, like, you say writing is fun for you.
I always say that. And, yeah.
I haven't seen any evidence, but but yeah, so like you know, writing is fun for you now, but it wasn't then.
It wasn't.
No,
it was a worse torture because I wanted to have written.
Yeah.
You know, and then when you actually try to do it, it would suck. So then you're at a real impasse, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's really the trickiest part. At that time, I think I wrote mostly because I did have that strong desire to someday be a writer.
Yeah.
I had nothing else going on really that was as interesting.
Yeah.
So I think I just, I don't know if I mean, I was going to say I had faith, but I don't think even that. I think it was just kind of like, I mean, the thing is, there were other things I had done in my life that didn't work right away.
Yeah.
So you kind of go, well, you have to work at it a little bit. And then also there was, I suppose, taking comfort in what little progress you did make. Like, even though I can look back and say, okay, in this period, I was working on this story that turned into nothing. But inside that period, you were still making small improvements, which I think. But I think that the real truthful answer is I just wanted it so badly.
Yeah.
And I had tried other things. You know, music was, I still love music, but I could tell really early with that it wasn't going to be my life's work. I didn't love it enough.
Yeah.
So I think I just kept coming back to it out of a kind of, I mean, on one hand, just desperate ego. I really wanted to be known for something. And I wanted to have my life be an artistic life. Yeah, and I think also kind of like at some point I was like, if you only talk about it and don't do it, you're full of shit. And so, you know, get on with it. But again, I did quit. There were months where I didn't do anything in that whole period, you know, where I just working or traveling or whatever.
Did you have ever a point where you're just like, I'm not doing this? Like where you were thinking of giving up? Because I would imagine that there was a point, but then you're like, well, what am I doing? Yeah,
it was also, the other thing I had that I'm kind of embarrassed about was I had an incredible, I mean, you would call it confidence if there was any grounding to it, but it was just like, I know I'm going to do this sometime. Someday I'll get it.
Might as well do it now.
Well, kind of, yeah, like that. And also like an arrogance, because for a lot of that time I wasn't despairing about not being good at it because I knew I would be. Yeah. I wasn't reading that much to try to get better at it. I wasn't seeking any teaching. I just was like this, honestly, I think I did a lot of thinking about what it would be like when it happened. You know,
and what did you think it was going to be like?
You know, just I always coveted the idea of having an actual physical book.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, if this is the problem of being interviewed by your daughter, you tend to be more honest than you. I think I had this feeling. I always wanted to please people / be known for something.
Yeah.
So a lot of the mental life then was imagining what it would be like when people liked me for my writing. You know, like thinking, oh, well, Saunders is, you know, I told you this story one time when I used to play baseball. I'd always have a narrative, like a sportscaster on my mind. So the young American. So it was kind of like that. I was like, yeah, he so there was a lot of narration of the future success that I was making no attempts to actually get.
Well, that's so funny because I always really link your writing life now with your spiritual life. Because it does seem like it's definitely a practice. Like you try at least to do it every day and you enjoy doing it every day. So it's funny to think that like something that was so linked up with your ego at the beginning is now like probably still pretty linked up with your ego.
Very,
yeah.
actually,
But has like kind of a different tilt to it in a weird way.
But that's exactly it, the tilt, because you know, even now I can be writing something and at 3:05 be in a really pure relation to the text. I'm not even there. I'm just like trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Then something will happen, and at 3:06 I'll go, ooh, the New Yorker is going to love this, or the Young American. It just and then at 3:07 I'll suddenly get distracted and want to quit. I mean, so I think that's the interesting thing is you have to be willing to accept whatever mindset happens to be on you at the moment. Don't disallow too much. And say, yeah, well, of course I'm egotistical. That's why I got into this. And, I mean, most of what we do in this life has some ego basis.
Yeah.
So maybe the ambition would be to, I say allow everything, and maybe just slightly over the course of your life change the emphasis. So now I'm partly because I've had some success, I'm much less concerned about that and more concerned about kind of like the clock ticking and trying to do the best work I can in the time left. Or on a given day with like, well, let's, can we do as much as possible to get the story to the higher ground?
Yeah.
So I think that the mix has changed over the years, maybe. You know?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
even
yeah.
then, it wasn't that different. I mean, what we would call the spiritual life at that point was very much an aspiration life. Like, it was about being cool. Like, how do I become somebody who's accomplishing something? So that it didn't feel spiritual, but it felt kind of consuming, you know? And
Yeah. How did having kids change your perspective on writing and literature?
Well, in retrospect, it gave me everything, because before that, no, seriously,
Yes.
because I mean, it's often to think it's common to think the opposite. Like when I had my kids, my creative life slowed down. But for me, if I look back up to that time, I was working hard at it because I'd been through Syracuse, and I had still, the ambition. But before we had you guys, I didn't really have a very active moral life. Like, I was a good person kind of out of habit. Like, I wasn't like doing anything too bad. But we didn't really have a sense of moral urgency in my work. I don't know what a story should be about or what it should take on. It seems all pretty cut and dry to me. So there'd be a lot of manufactured drama a la Hemingway that had nothing to do with my life. Then we had you guys, and we didn't have any money. And the primary thing going on in my mind at that time was, holy shit, this is so amazing. Now I understand why people have kids. I understand from the inside. It's the number one thing in life. I hope I don't fail these guys. We don't have any money. It's a little bit, I'm projecting ahead to when you're 10, 11, 12. This is going to be embarrassing if we don't get our shit together and have a decent, at least middle-class American life.
Yeah.
And I can't seem to do that.
Yeah.
And I also, am I going to have to let this writing dream go and all that pressure?
Yeah.
But the main thing that happened was, to have these two little beings suddenly who are so precious to you. And just by extrapolation, you go, oh, God, every kid was born that way. Every kid either was or should have been loved like this. Mm-hmm. Everything popped into moral focus all of a sudden. Literally everything mattered. You walk by somebody who's having a hard time living on the street. You're like, oh my God, that was somebody's kid, you know? Or at work, I was working on a corporate job, and suddenly I wasn't like, maybe that sort of cliche way of thinking at that time was, oh yeah, I'm just a corporate stooge, like selling out to the system. So there was some of that. And also there was, oh my God, we've got insurance.
Yeah.
I'm doing this for somebody. I'm doing it for my family. And then also, and yet I'm away from them 10 hours a day, and I'm missing so much, so everything got fraught. And even a small, like at work, if somebody was trying to push me out of a project or something, or if anything was happening, because the job wasn't a given, it was kind of the branch we were in wasn't doing that well, and people were getting laid off. So all of that was suddenly infused with meaning. So a little corporate intrigue that a few years before I would have thought was just mundane, banal crap was life or death, So it was really good, And then, but the only problem was then you have the problem of the starving artist thing is out. The rambling art, that's out. And so you have to find the time. That was the
Well, that leads me to another question I wanted to ask you. So a lot of your earlier work is kind of based off of the shortfalls of capitalism, the cruelty and humiliation of it, which is something that you were very familiar with. You worked in a slaughterhouse. I think when Caitlin was born, were selling Cokes at a ballpark.
Very lucrative, that one.
So these experiences obviously influenced a lot of your earlier work. But now that you're kind of a successful writer, what would you say informs your work now, or what makes it feel urgent?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is, I didn't at the time realize that I was writing about capitalism. I was just kind of doing some other stuff, like trying to get the energy going. Yeah. So now I think it's kind of the same principle. Like, I'm assuming that all that stuff is still there somewhere. It's buried because now we have an easier life. Yeah. But I think those early experiences of being we were never poor, but being challenged in that way, they don't really go away. Like that feeling of, I still have it when you pull a credit card out, you're kind of like, and it goes through. Yes. But I think then, so I still think, I think now what I thought then, which is you have to write to find out what it is that's important to you. You don't want to think, you don't want to have the idea in your head, I write about capitalism, because then you will, and that'll be it.
Yeah.
So I think what's happened from an outsider perspective, that early struggle with capitalism and all that, and the erosion of grace that's associated with it.
Yeah.
I feel it a little bit expanding now, where it's, that feeling of being an unlimited person in a limited universe is universal. It's not, it takes a particular manifestation in capitalism, but anybody who's alive in this world, no matter how rich they are or how whatever, they feel impending death, they feel illness, they feel the limitations of their own identity. So I think I'm feeling in this book I just finished that there's some of that, like, okay, even if your life was okay, you might not be okay.
Yeah.
That kind of samsara type feeling.
Yeah.
But again, that's just what I'm noticing now that I've finished it and I'm reading it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So you talk a lot about that meter in your head.
I don't know which one you mean. Can you refresh my memory?
When you're writing stories, the positive, negative meter, sentence to sentence.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
I'm going to use that.
You can, I'll charge 25 cents every time you use it. And
You'd be rich.
I'd be really rich. But you can explain a little bit about that for whoever hasn't heard that. But my real question, my actual question was, so you can explain that, but also it reminds me a lot of the situation that we're having with Kai, who is our dog.
Yes.
And so Kai is this very old dog who we love very much, who's very physically healthy, but seems to have some sort of dog dementia happening.
And a couple of little leg issues.
And a couple of leg issues. So I'll let you explain a little bit more about Kai. But my main question is the situation with Kai. Do you think that that approach, do you think you approach like frustrating circumstances the same way that you approach stories?
So yes, that's very perceptive, because what at least I try to. Like a lot of times I'm just, irritated. But I think the idea that you, in writing, what that approach boils down to is let's forget what you thought about the story yesterday and read it today. And just see if you were a first-time reader, how would you react to it? If you don't like the word, coast, you cut it. And, so it's just basically reader response. So I think that's part of my...
that's the meter that we're talking about.
Yeah, right. You just read it and see. And the meter is kind of just a cheesy metaphor I came up with, but it's basically the process of saying, instead of, okay, when I was a younger writer, what I thought was, what do I want to do? What's my intention? How can I outsmart this stupid reader and make her feel what I want her to?
Yeah.
Then the change was, well, let's just see what you think. Like, just read it. And read it as if you didn't see it before, and see what it does to you and adjust. So that's part of, I think, and I was doing that a long time. I think I started talking about it this way when we became Buddhists, because the idea is, as in a moment in real life, you're bringing your ideas to the moment. I'm tense, I'm nervous, I'm happy, I'm whatever. He doesn't like me, I'm about to get fired. But in sort of a more advanced approach is to quiet that down and just see, like, without too much mental activity, assess the moment, see what energy is coming off it. So that's with Kai, that's part of what I'm doing now, is saying, okay, on the one hand, I'm a 63-year-old irritable guy who's being taxed beyond my limits, but also I'm the person observing that. So I can say, okay, if whenever the dog wakes you in the middle of the night, you leap up and say, fuck, then you're going to go into the next room grouchy. And then you're going to handle, less well. If you pause for a second and go, oh, Kai, then you're better. So, it's the same. I think everything in life, I'm starting to think, is about how good can you get at quieting your mind, which is not really that useful in a lot of occasions. And then, if you quiet the monkey mind, something else arises. And that thing, I think, is more reliable. So,
but which started first, though, for you? Was it like, because I really see that the correlation between the way that you approach your writing and the way that you approach a lot of difficult and frustrating situations in life. And I'm wondering if they feed off of each other, or if like one started before the other.
I think the writing was first.
Yeah.
Because I had a very long, difficult apprenticeship with the method of saying, I'm in control here. you know. And so when I got to that, there's a moment when I was at Radiant and I kind of figured out how to write in this way. That was the first time I'd ever felt anything like that. Like just respond intuitively to what's in front of you on the page, you know. And also there was an element of being entertaining, which I'd kind of put off to the side.
Yeah.
But then after that, not long after that, we started doing meditation, and I could see that they were kind of related, you know. So it's partly, I have a really active, anxious mind. So part of it is just almost like mentally thinking, okay, just lean back a little bit. Don't think so much. Don't act so quickly on your first thought. But I think the writing led me to it. And if you'd asked me this back in the Radiant days, I would not have had an answer. In fact, I went on NPR. My first media thing I ever did, I was so excited. I drove from Rochester, Washington, D.C. in a day and went on the All Things Considered, and I was so nervous. I mean, I talk fast all the time.
Yeah.
But on the way home, I was listening to the radio, and it was like, Robert Siegel would be like, so George, da-da-da. And I'd be, and Mom called me, said, I called from a gas station, said, did they speed that up? I said, But part of the reason I was talking so fast is I had no idea. He would say, like, well, how did you approach the writing of these stories? I'm like, I just wrote them. So I didn't really have any conceptual idea that I was enacting an approach at that point. I was just really, you know, it was only later, especially when I started teaching, that you have to go, oh, what is it that's happening there, you know? So it was first that I figured out how to do it on the page, and then it started to slowly inform the rest of my life. Like that's,
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting. Okay, now this is kind of
okay. That's one of the benefits of artistic practice is it's probably the place in one's life that privileges the intuitive most strongly.
Yeah.
So you're working on something by intuition and inadvertently find out who you are long before you can articulate it. Your taste sort of leads you to it, and in that mode, nobody's asking you to defend it. Like when you're painting or something, you're playing a song, no one's saying, well, can you explain why that's not a valid question. So your instincts get you there before your intellectual mind could. And once you get there, I remember just recognizing that feeling of how it felt to work on a story correctly for me, and how the confidence. I remember riding home along the Erie Canal after a day of writing, or not a day of writing, but a day in which I had written a little bit.
Yeah.
And just feeling like, yeah, okay, I know who I am. And no matter what the rest of my life looks like, I'm kind of a frazzled, inefficient father, living in a rental house or a small house we bought. I had that little 15-minute window when I'd really felt like myself, that I'd been led to by intuition, so that was very empowering.
Well, that's another interesting thing is like the kind of empowerment that can come from just even a small bit of your artistic practice. Like, obviously life is difficult, and I wonder, how much having that artistic practice sustained you through, some of the more difficult times in your life.
It was huge. When you guys, we were living in Pittsford, and I think we were down to one car, so I would ride this bike to and from work. And so it was in some ways difficult in this mundane way. It wasn't that hard, but I just thought, I can't believe I'm a tech writer. I'm not making a lot of money. I'm kind of low on the totem pole. But then between having you guys and mom at home, like I have a beautiful family that I actually really love. I guess I hadn't imagined that happening to me, So that was a huge, just to get home and be in that was a big, and then, but as you say, then to say, okay, that I served that part of my life by working, and now I'm going to go home and participate. I also quietly, privately served my artistic life for that little tiny window when I stole 20 minutes and did pretty well. So that was really maybe the happiest time of my life, to be needed at home, to be doing something, vaguely self-sacrificing at work, and then also to be able to preserve a little bit of a wedge of that. It took me like, remember there's a time when I would ride home on the bus, and that was my editing time,
Yeah.
And just to say, okay, first of all, I hope nothing crazy happens on this bus to interrupt me, and have my little red pen and my story, and just like to work through the draft once or twice on the bus. And then when I got done, I knew I had this little pile of papers that had good changes in it. They weren't stupid. I didn't do them lightly. Put it in my backpack, have my day, knowing I could go back in the morning and put the changes in. That was, it was so rich. It was fantastic. I still love that time because it wasn't my main job. Nobody knew I was doing it. It was very secret. Mom knew, but the world didn't know. and it was all ahead, you know, it was all potential, and I
Yeah.
could feel I was doing something kind of new for me, and it was really sweet.
Yeah. Was there ever a medium or like what's a form you appreciate but couldn't see yourself pulling off very well, like within the writing world?
Well, I mean, screenplays I've been, as you know, struggling with since you were 3 or maybe 2. Actually, I remember very clearly when you were little, you may remember, we made you a dollhouse. Mom and I made you a dollhouse in the attic.
From Papa.
Yeah, and so I remember, though, that it was in Pittsford, and we had the dollhouse on the floor, and there was that white table that you have now, I think. Do you have that one, that white kitchen table?
Is it wooden?
Yeah, that one.
No, that one got ruined
No, anyway.
in Chicago.
What?
A family heirloom.
But anyway, some little tables up there, and I would my job was to put the dollhouse together, and Mom would paint it, and then I was working on a screenplay.
Yeah.
Even then, and it was.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
What screenplay?
It was
what
for
were you-
Offloading for Mrs. Schwartz, and it was the Hudlin brothers, who are great filmmakers, and they had been nice enough to commission me to write a pilot, and I just had no idea how to do it. So that one's eluded me all this time. Poems, not, you know.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Yeah. The only thing I mean,
Write
with
some funny poems.
Funny poems,
You
yeah,
can
I
write
think-
funny poems.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have the working class curse of poems and plays. They seem above me, so whenever I do it, I get an elevated diction, like, you know,
Yeah.
it was an evening, the clouds were low, you know. Why do you? But if you say, then write a funny poem, then I'm like, oh, I
Yeah.
could do that. Yeah.
What about like biography or something?
It doesn't. It's a circle. It doesn't interest me because I know I couldn't do it well. So
Yeah.
it's just like I just.
Back to the ego thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But so now that you, like, before we were talking about kind of the ego and like the wanting to be appreciated for something that you do well. Now that you have been appreciated for something that you do well, what's
I'm actually not neurotic at all anymore.
Yeah. I just knew it.
Yeah. No.
The Dalai Lama always said, just go out and be really successful.
That's all it takes. Don't
God.
fail. If you don't want to be unhappy, don't fail.
All of my natural ideas were right about this.
Yeah.
Just-
No, I mean, one thing is it let's see. I think, yeah, it's interesting. There have been times when, no, I'm trying to think. I was going to say there have been times when I've had enough success where my ambition waned a little bit, but then my self-esteem is low enough, or you could say my respect for the form is enough.
Yeah.
That something will come out and I'll get some praise for it, not enough probably, but some. You know,
Yeah.
it's enough, not enough
Never is,
for
yeah.
me. But then I'll read something good. And I'll go, oh yeah, wait a minute, you haven't even started yet. So there's some kind of combination of pride that lets me finish something and polish it, feeling like it's the best thing ever. And then not long after that, self-doubt, a realism enters in. Well, yeah, it's okay, but read Tolstoy's stupid. And then,
Yeah.
you know, so that I really trust, that feeling of wanting to, you know, keep getting better at it. You know,
Yeah.
the attention thing is a little more problematic because yes, it's never enough. You never. And it's almost like being putting your faith in a sugar buzz. Like, you know, you can do it like 6,000 times, and the next time you're like, you know what, I kind of see where this is going.
Yeah.
And so I think slightly as I'm getting older, the attention, whether it's positive or negative, is becoming a little less. It's calling me less.
Yeah.
Having gotten both, you feel like, okay, well, that's okay. Let's ignore that and try to concentrate on the quality of what you're doing. You know, so it is like doing something repetitively and then finally going, oh yeah, so I see it in a sense that's kind of empty. There isn't really praise and blame. You get it, and still, if I get praise, I inflate a little. If I get blamed, I get defensive.
Yeah.
But you also, there is that mind that steps outside and goes, yeah, of course, you know, if you eat a lot of beans, you're going to fart. That's not a character thing, you know.
So it's now, you would say, a little bit, hopefully, more tending towards like the artistic form.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I always did, but maybe early on it was like I want to. The two things were very tied together.
The praise yet,
right?
You know?
And I didn't have a life yet. I hadn't
Yeah.
made a life in it. So now I think it is becoming more and more, especially because you know I mean, we joke about my impending demise and all, but I think as you do get older,
The
I mean,
end is near.
The end is near, but how near? But you do kind of think, well, where's my time put most profitably? And to try to get more attention doesn't seem that great.
Right.
But to try to say, well, you know, it'd be nice to, well, if nothing else, just as a way to spend your days, you know, to try to write something that's really good and better than you've done before. That feels
I mean,
not quite solid, but it feels substantial.
Doesn't this like kind of Sisyphus-like nature of it depress you though?
Sometimes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah, but not. Honestly, it does only when I'm not doing it. Like after Lincoln and the Bardo, I had a lot of that feeling like, oh my God, I got to start over again, and at the best, I won't get that much attention again. So
Yeah.
but then once you actually get on the hunt, it's a little bit like that. Like the dogs start baying, like So so part of it for me is to go, okay, that's real. I know it is circular, but I also know that once I submit to the circularity of it, it's really pleasurable and it's meaningful, and it's maybe, to a certain extent, it might be something that staves off depression for me a little bit. And the times when I couldn't work, I can feel myself getting a little bit low energy. So when I'm in it, I'm like, of course I would chase that deer or whatever. Of course, when you're not in it, sometimes you can say, oh, hunting, it's so silly.
Well, it's also like one of those things where you can totally, if you start applying that logic to something you enjoy, then you can actually apply it to everything. It's like, why am I taking a shower?
Right.
Why
exactly.
am I...
That's a good question. Why, what's with all this showering?
Yeah, what's with everything?
No, but I think that's something, when I was in high school, I don't know what brought this on, but I think probably, like the cycle of life where you sometimes just have a low moment. But I remember thinking that, like, well, since everything that I can think of that's fun is servicing my ego and is therefore invalid, isn't the highest position to not want anything? And I thought, yeah, that's right. That's very Eastern, just don't want to. And I tried it, and I almost went crazy. I just felt so bored by life. Like really, why should I get out of bed? Why should I go to school? If I feel
well, it's kind of like you got to the end point without doing the
right,
work to
right,
get
no,
there.
right, but
like,
no, that's
you're
true.
You're not naturally not wanting anything. You're just kind of like
you're skipping ahead to
you're
it.
skipping right.
But there's something to that. Yeah. Like if you knew that living one way made you happy and energetic and animated, and living another way made you feel depressed and tired, and it's in the abstract, either one is as good as the next, but when you've been depressed and tired and despondent, that's not very fun, so you pray to be in that second phase.
Okay, I just have like a couple more questions.
These are great questions, but I'm not just saying that because you're my daughter.
So
these are questions I've never been asked before, actually.
Well, I worked really hard on that because of the meter thing, Okay, this is just kind of a last silly one, but how do you name your books? Lincoln and the Bardo, swim in the pond in the rain, swim in a pond in the rain.
Yeah, easy for you to say. I mostly, the one thing I try not to do is make them too charged. Like if you have a metaphorical title, that doesn't,
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just want a title that I think is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like I think the Swim in the Pond with the Rain was named something like Studies in the Russians or something. I'm like, I don't want that, So it's kind of just waiting as late as I can, and then if something with Lincoln and the Bardo, I had the title before the book. I just liked that way that sounded.
Yeah.
And at one point there was some talk about changing it because, Bardo's kind of an Eastern word.
Yeah.
So someone was like Lincoln at the Gate or something, and I just went, nah. My heart just sunk when I did, So I think a lot of art is really honoring a part of ourselves that we usually suppress, which is just I like it.
Yeah.
It's cool. I just think it's cool. And so in a way, I think that's editing, revising is just doing that over and over again, like saying I'm going to choose what I radically prefer. And it's interesting because you put aside your normal good person armor, which feels like it has to defend everything and articulate everything. But you go, no, it's that because I like it better.
Yeah.
Although I do remember when I was younger, and in the Syracuse house, I'd be working on a story and I'd need a name and I'd yell up the hall, Alena, give me a name. And you'd go like, Ted Ed or Burn, some crazy name. So Pastoralia has a lot of names that you shouted down. You didn't even come down the hall. Give me a name.
Remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well.
There was something in some of those, like when you used to do those little drawings, those are really, for me, kind of inspiring because they were so simple and they were really funny and plain, and I always thought that was cool. So.
I don't remember the drawings.
I like the one where you said, there's a little guy and a big monstrous looking guy, and the little guy's saying, "Who knows? They might be nice."
Yeah, and it's like
NISE.
Who knows? Yeah, who knows? They might be nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Dad.
My pleasure.
My guest was George Saunders, and you can purchase his book, A Swim in a Pond in the Rain, at SKYLITbooks.com. Boom.
Is
that good?
Really good.
Thank you for listening to the Skylight Books podcast series. Please don't forget to visit our website at skylitbooks.com and make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast for more author talks and bookseller conversations. You can find us on Podbean, iTunes, and Spotify. Stay safe and healthy, and we hope to see you back in our store soon.